Al Jazeera Podcasts.
I used to tell friends that to die in a car accident was the height of absurdity. I was wrong. Dying in a car accident alongside a rough draft of what amounts to your autobiography in a briefcase, now that is the height of absurdity. Our desire for meaning in a meaningless universe. Absurd.
The absurd fascinated writer and philosopher Albert Camus his whole life, the last days of which he spent at his home in Lourmarin, a village in Provence, France. He celebrated the new year, 1960, with his wife, Francine, and children twins Jean and Catherine. His friend and publisher, Michel Gallimard, was also there with his family.
I bought that house after winning the Nobel Prize in Literature. Why Lourmarin? Besides its beauty, it also reminded me of Algiers, the place where I grew up and left my heart.
Love also occupied his thoughts at the time. Camus wrote to his many mistresses back in Paris.
Dear Catherine, I am so happy at the idea of seeing you again. Dear Maria, I am kissing you already. I wanted to get back to Paris. Michel Gallimard insisted that I go back with him and his family in their Facel Vega. I hated traveling by car.
They set off together on the 4th of January 1960. But about 100 kilometers outside of Paris, Gallimard, who was behind the wheel, lost control of the car and crashed it into a tree. He died in the hospital 5 days later. His wife and daughter survived, but Camus' fate was instant. Ever wonder what history's most famous and infamous would say if you asked them for their side of the story? Well, here's your chance. I'm Charles Dance, your narrator for Hindsight, an original podcast by Al Jazeera. This is a dramatized series based on historical events that resurrects some of the world's most notable figures. In this episode, we meet Albert Camus, a man difficult to categorize. He was a titan of French literature in the 20th century, but it was his North African roots that shaped his writing. In philosophy circles, many called him a prominent voice of existentialism, but Camus distanced himself from the movement. In hindsight, some see Camus as a brave man of unwavering principle. Others, a man whose principles lacked adequate bravery. Hindsight. You've heard of them. Now it's time you hear from them.
I was born on the 7th of November 1913 in Mondovi. Well, that's what it was called when Algeria was under French rule. You might recognize the name it is today, Dréan. It's a small coastal town in the northeast. Both my parents were born in Algeria, but of European working-class backgrounds. Mama was Spanish. My father, Lucien Camus, was from a family of French migrants. He died fighting in the First World War, just 1 month shy of my first birthday.
The lack of a father haunted him his whole life. In the manuscript he died with, he wrote, "No, he would never know his father, who would continue to sleep over there, his face forever lost in the ashes."
After my father died, we moved to Algiers. That's where I grew up with my family. My maman, brother Lucien, my grandmother and 2 uncles lived on Rue de Lyon in Bellecour. We were pieds noirs, Blackfoot.
A pied noir is a term for the hundreds of thousands of European settlers living in Algeria during French colonial rule. The term may be derived from the coal-stained feet of Mediterranean sailors or the black boots of French soldiers.
All 6 of us shared 3 rooms in a tiny Algiers apartment. Our family didn't have much, but we were happy, and there was love in our home.
Oui, maman. Pardon. Can you say that again? No. Don't worry, maman. I've got all the time in the world.
Maman was partially deaf and had a speech impediment. She did hard menial work to look after my brother and me.
Maman, please sit down. We've been cleaning all day. I can sweep the floor.
She was illiterate. Seeing I was a bright boy, she made sure I got an education. A kind soul in a cruel world.
France's occupation of Algeria was brutal. It invaded Algeria in 1832, and by the time Camus was born in 1913, the French had killed hundreds of thousands of indigenous Algerians. Some scholars call it a genocide. In the early 20th century, the Arab and Berber communities had fewer rights than the Pieds Noirs, settlers of European origins like the Camus family. Young Camus had an acute awareness of the racism that surrounded him.
Pierre, did you see that? They kicked that young Arab boy off the bus just because he had lice on his djellaba. They really are treated differently.
While there was darkness surrounding him, there was also much joy.
I spent time with my uncle Gustave. He taught me how to dress with some style. He also had books. Lots of books. Together we discussed Balzac, Hugo, and Zola. And beyond books, there was also my first love. No, not a woman. Ah, yes. What I know most surely in the long run about morality and obligations, I owe to football. I was a dedicated player. I was a good goalkeeper, and I could score. I guess you can say duality is a common theme in my life, both in sports and politics.
But at 17, Camus contracted tuberculosis.
It followed me throughout life. Being a sickly person robbed me of sport, so I had to focus on my other passions.
In 1933, Camus got a scholarship to study philosophy at the University of Algiers.
I studied the way in which humans tried to make sense of the world. I also began to wonder whether there was any sense to be made. I loved university and wanted to become an academic, but I felt that vocation required too much work and commitment for a semi-invalid like me. One bout almost killed me. When I felt well, my friends and I went to the cafes to discuss poetry, literature, and politics. That's how I met Simonier. I was enchanted by her looks and her charisma, and she was charmed by mine. We married in 1934, when I was 20 years old.
Camus' marriage to Huye was difficult from the start.
Simone, I'm home, darling. Oh, you must be kidding. Are you high again?
Prescribed morphine for period cramps when she was 14, she'd since become an addict. Some say that's the reason Camus married Simone, to save her from herself.
I stayed with her for 2 years, finishing my studies, and graduated with a degree in philosophy.
Camus was never a philosopher by advanced training or profession, but he was a thinker. He went on to make important contributions to a wide range of issues in moral philosophy, and became a critic of traditional institutions like religion and marriage, especially marriage.
Oh, will you look at this ring? It's a sad symbol. A wedding is a way of imprisoning people, you know. I had always suspected marriage to be against human nature. The relationship with Simone convinced me that I was right. We broke up. I poured myself into work doing, well, anything. I was a meteorologist, police clerk, salesman, anything to pay my way. I also began to think of myself as an artist, a writer, and the theater was my medium. General Franco has sent his troops to suppress our rebellion. The far right won the election, and now our country is on the brink of civil war.
Camus' plays questioned established political and religious ideas.
I wanted to bring theater to the underprivileged and working classes. Okay, cut! Great work, everyone. Revolt in Asturias is going to be a hit. What do you mean, no theaters agreed to allow us to perform? Not a single stage.
It was a delicate situation in Algeria. There were demands for better rights and questions about whether violence was the solution.
But I could be quite stubborn on some issues. Just ask my comrades in the Communist Party. Like a lot of young people looking for change at the time, I joined. That was around 1934-1935. Fighting for justice and against oppression were at the top of my docket. Yes, I know Stalin supports a strong France to oppose these Nazis in Germany. I am certainly against the Nazis. Any man of moral standing would be. But we should turn our support to getting native Algerians more rights and uplifting the working class. They didn't like that position. There was racism all over Algeria in those days, and that included the Communist Party. They eventually had enough of me and threw me out. I believe it was in 1937 that I first met Francine Faure. She was probably the most important woman in my life, after my mother, of course. I was 24 years old. She was a mathematician, a pianist, and like me, a French Algerian. She was beautiful. Francine, I am in love with you. But my experience in marriage taught me many lessons. Monogamy is against human nature. In 1938, I turned my hand to journalism and started working for the Alger Républicain, a leftist paper sympathetic to the working class and Muslims. There was something about the pressure of a daily deadline that really appealed to me, so different from playwriting. I wore many hats, like editorial assistant, writer, book reviewer. Hello, sir. I'm a reporter with Alger Républicain. Excuse me. I want to ask you about this new law that could affect your overtime pay. I visited Algerian Arabs and Berbers and wrote about their oppression under a system that favored the pieds noirs. This is your home? Where's your well? An hour walk away. Oh dear. In all my extensive trips across Algeria, the region of Kabylie stands out as a testament to the cruelty of French policies.
Kabylie was already poor when drought hit in the 1930s. While some private charities tried to intervene, France didn't provide enough aid.
My series in 1939 angered and embarrassed the nationalist French authorities controlling Algeria. It also made me a little famous. I founded my own paper with my friend Pascal Piat. We called it Le Soir Républicain. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity should be applied to everyone under the French flag, including in Algeria. I was interested in the human condition, in all its misery, as well as the need for compassion. And I began to write more about it.
Camus also published 2 series of lyrical essays exploring some of his ideas. It was the first time he addressed absurdity.
You see, for me, life has no meaning. And there is something deeply absurd about the search for meaning. If there is a sin against life, it consists not so much in despairing as in hoping for another life and in eluding the implacable grandeur of this one. All these churches and religions that demanded we strive for a life in the hereafter. Absurd. I wasn't the only writer recognizing the absurdity of life. I reviewed the book La Nausée. It was an offering from a relatively new French writer and philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre. I see in Sartre a writer of unbounded promise.
Jean-Paul Sartre is a key figure in existentialism. His philosophical approach emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent determining their own development through acts of the will.
I wanted to emphasize the beauty in having no life but the one we are living now. I was always on an eternal search for beauty.
His enduring search for beauty included women. His wit, charm, and good looks meant that beauty often came rather easily to him.
Oh, Francine, don't worry about the little blonde. She's a beauty, but just a flirtation. I was still with Francine, but I was living for the moment, you see.
As Camus explored new ideas, Europe was going through its own transformation. In September 1939, Adolf Hitler's Germany invaded Poland, and with it, the Second World War began.
These are today's main events. Germany has invaded Poland and has bombed many towns.
Great Britain and France declared war on Germany.
Taking a stand against the Nazis was imperative. Any able man of sound mind and body should have signed up to fight the plague of fascism. Is this the registration office? I'd like to join the fight against the Nazis. I tried to join the French military twice. I was rejected on account of my tuberculosis. So instead, I wrote and published articles on the war.
As France descended into conflict, the French Algerian authorities began censoring local media, including Camus' writing.
My goodness, this article is barely intelligible. There are so many parts blacked out. Of course, all freedoms have their limits. Those limits, however, must be freely acknowledged, not imposed. The question is how a journalist, faced with the suppression of that freedom, can remain free. In January of 1940, the conservative French government shut down the Soir Républicain. Obviously, my work had something to do with it. I was blacklisted. At the same time, I decided it was finally time to pull all these ideas in my head into something substantial. I had something to say. I decided to leave Algiers for Paris that March. I promised Francine I would write to her.
In early 1940, Germany was at France's borders. Soldiers were at the front. But except for power blackouts, talk of ration cards, and a few sandbags set up around monuments, Paris seemed, well, like Paris in March of 1940.
Ah, so this is Paris. I miss the warmth of Algeria already. I'm like a fish out of water here. I took a part-time editing job at a large newspaper called Paris Soir, but it was only to pay the bills. I kept most of my energy for my real writing, my first novel, The Stranger. I looked up at the mass of signs and stars in the night sky and laid myself open for the first time to the benign indifference of the world. I was also working on an essay where I provided a different take on the Greek myth of Sisyphus. The gods had condemned Sisyphus to ceaselessly rolling a rock to the top of a mountain, whence the stone would fall back of its own weight. They had thought, with some reason, that there is no more dreadful punishment than futile and hopeless labor. I saw it differently. Sisyphus never gave up. Surely that was worth something. And I had a play on the go too. Another new take on a tale from the classic ages, Caligula. The only mistake one makes in life is to cause others suffering.
Camus also wrote to Francine, as he had promised. He asked her to come to Paris, all the while keeping up a flirty correspondence with another girlfriend back in Algeria, his lover and theatrical collaborator, Yvonne Ducella.
Yvonne was lovely, but I really did wish for Francine to come. She, however, insisted I marry her before she'd even consider coming. It all seems so silly now, given what came next.
More on that after the break.
I'm Samantha Johnson, and I'm here to tell you about Now You Know, a new show from Al Jazeera. Now You Know is dedicated to amplifying women's voices, stories, and at times, some pretty uncomfortable topics. This is a safe space where we go all in to offer you information and inspiration. Check out Now You Know, a new show from Al Jazeera. Find us on Al Jazeera's YouTube channel or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. In May 1940, Nazi forces invaded France. The French troops were quickly overwhelmed. 1 month later, France surrendered. The Nazis marched into Paris practically unopposed.
This capitulation was nothing short of shameful. I carried a chest full of fury during these days.
Marshal Philippe Pétain signed a deal with the Nazis that saved Paris from destruction, but wounded French pride everywhere. Pétain agreed to the Nazi occupation of northern France and set up a collaborative state called the Vichy regime. It ruled the rest of the country, as well as French colonies in North Africa.
Everyone was getting out of Paris. I watched the exodus from my hotel room. Maybe that's why I decided to follow through on my promise to Francine. She wanted marriage, I loved her, and the world was falling apart. So I thought, why not? The newspaper, Paris Soir, decided to move some of its operations west of Lyon, and me along with them. I arranged to meet and marry Francine there, but I had a heavy heart.
With wedding plans underway, Camus wrote a letter to Yvonne Ducella.
I'm probably going to waste my life. I am going to marry F.
Camus and Francine wed on December the 3rd, 1940, at a town hall in Lyon. There was no party, just a few drinks with friends. Paris Soir shut down completely, so Camus lost his job. The couple moved back to Algeria, to her parents' home in Oran.
I worked with the French publisher Gallimard to develop and edit The Stranger. We published it in May 1942. We had plans for the myth of Sisyphus too. But I wasn't at my best. I had another bout of tuberculosis, and the doctor advised me to spend time in the French mountains. Francine and I moved there together. It was a happy time, in its own way. I missed her when she had to return to Oran to work. Still, there was much to celebrate. I was so proud when Jean-Paul Sartre wrote an essay that September praising me. The essay Myth of Sisyphus came out in October, and Sartre again commended it. I was 28 years old and a literary star.
While much was made about his existential ideals in his works, his reflection on Don Juanism, the act of having many female partners, was also a theme in Myth of Sisyphus.
It is because Don Juan loves them with the same passion, and each time with his whole self, that he must repeat his gift and his profound quest.
One of the main criticisms of The Stranger, in particular, was that the story's victim was an unnamed Arab man whose point of view is never considered.
There are always critics, and I was open to discussion and debate, a joy of life.
It was a turning point in Camus' life. He never did live in Algeria again, and when the Allies pushed the Axis powers out of the north in November 1942, he found himself cut off from Francine. He had to ask occupied powers permission to travel to Paris. In June of 1943, Camus attended the theatre in Nazi-occupied Paris. Here, he had a chance encounter.
Excuse me, Monsieur Sartre. I'm Camus. You've reviewed some of my fiction work. It's an honor to make your acquaintance.
Monsieur Camus, what a pleasure to meet you.
Despite our differences, we hit it off. Sartre was one of the leaders of the existentialist movement, and some people labeled me the same. I reject it wholeheartedly. Existentialism is too reductive a theory and gives no room for one's nature. Nor was I a philosopher, even if at times I pulled at the thread of the philosophical. You see, I was nothing but a writer, and a man who enjoyed the sun, the sea, and all things of beauty.
But with light there must also be darkness, especially in wartime. One of the manuscripts Camus was working on around the time was The Plague. It became one of his most famous novels.
In the face of such overwhelming darkness, it is radical to maintain a sense of hope. But hope was the only way out. We should go forward, groping our way through the darkness, stumbling perhaps at times, and try to do what good lay in our power. I felt like I needed to do my part to fight the Nazis. In December 1943, I took up what would be one of the most significant roles of my career. Good evening. Oh, passcode, right. Is Monsieur Pinova in? Bonsoir. I joined the French Resistance as a writer and editor for the underground newspaper Combat. I rebelled against Maréchal Pétain's complicity with the Nazis. I opposed the persecution of minorities and the deference to fascism. I recruited Jean-Paul Sartre to the Combat. We were brothers in arms, or perhaps brothers in pens. Our hopes rose in the first half of 1944 as Germany and the Axis powers began to lose. We threw parties, listening to the details of the latest Nazi losses on the BBC.
German Chancellor informed the British ambassador.
And we drank. A lot. Jean-Paul, another drink?
Don't mind if I do.
And he kept writing, too.
I wrote a play called Le Malentendu, a tragic tale of misunderstanding and murder and the meaningless of life. The Théâtre des Mathurins in Paris agreed to take it on and had a suggestion for one of the leading roles.
Hello, I'm Maria Casares.
Maria Casares got her start at the Théâtre des Mathurins and went on to dominate French film in the 1940s and 50s. Camus was smitten.
Hello. I'm Albert Camus.
I know who you are.
The meeting was electric. Well, for me anyway. I courted her. We'd meet at cafes and talk about the play, life, each other. She was born in Spain, me in Algeria. A couple of foreigners taking France by storm. I met my match in Maria. From intellect to passion.
It was a heady time to fall in love. D-Day, June the 6th, 1944, the day the Allies landed on the French beaches of Normandy.
Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
It's the beginning of the end now. We can push them out. All that summer, the Parisians rose up against the occupiers. Labor strikes, attacks on German patrols, and by the middle of August, a full-on rebellion. The resistance came up from underground and fought the Germans head-on. I bore witness to it all. Paris is firing all its ammunition into the August night. Once again, justice must be redeemed with men's blood.
The resistance is said to have discouraged any notion of Camus getting a gun, but they sure appreciated his pen. On the 25th of August 1944, Germany surrendered Paris.
As soon as the Nazis left Paris, many people returned. I knew my wife, Francine, would want to reunite. Maria and I toyed with running away to Mexico. It was a fanciful idea that ended once Francine arrived, with her family. Hello, my dear.
It wasn't the happiest of reunions in Paris in October 1944. Still, there might have been some tender moments, as Francine became pregnant by the end of that year.
Camus, congratulations are in order.
Jean-Paul. Oh, that's right. Francine's expecting. The doctors suspect twins. How did you know?
Everyone knows. I'm guessing our Spanish friend knows too.
Some say Maria ended the affair once she found out Francine was pregnant.
I loved Maria, and I was excited about the children. There was a lot to consider. Everything was changing.
The world weighed heavily on Camus in the spring of 1945. He returned to Algeria for a few weeks to check in on his family. He found the Algerian independence movement had caught fire. Just one colonized country of many, keen to cut ties to European powers. Camus returned to Paris on May 8, 1945, VE Day, Victory Day in Europe. The newspapers were focused on Germany's surrender, but Camus was writing furiously about Algeria for the combat. Widespread demonstrations on the same day became violent, killing hundreds.
Faced by the events that are agitating North Africa today, extreme attitudes should be avoided. One such would be to present a situation as tragic when it is only serious. Another would be to be unaware of the great difficulties that Algeria is debating today.
It was the beginning of his walk across a tightrope of opinions in Algeria. That would make him unpopular on all sides.
The war had exposed humanity to such darkness, and now those who hadn't been killed or maimed had to continue living. The threat of Nazism had been replaced by something invisible: depression, nightmares of war, and even nihilism. What a time to become a father. Catherine and Jean were born in Paris on the 5th of September 1945. I fell in love with them immediately. But my feelings for Francine, well...
As you know, I have no children. But parenthood must be one of life's greatest privileges.
Parenthood? Why, yes, it's a beautiful honor, Jean-Paul. But marriage? Well, aren't I the one constantly writing about freedom? From tyranny and fascism, of course, but why shouldn't that extend to marriage? In the same year my children were born, I decided I wanted erotic freedom.
Francine went along with Camus' arrangement. She was already aware, or at least suspicious, of his womanizing.
In 1946, I met Patricia Blake. She was a 20-year-old copywriter for Vogue magazine and became an important part of my life. And, can you believe it, 4 years to the day I first met Maria Casares, our paths crossed in Paris in 1948. Tied to one another by the bonds of the earth, by intelligence, heart, and flesh, nothing I know can surprise or separate us.
In addition to Blake and Casares, Albert also had affairs with Catherine Sellers, an avant-garde actress and theatre director, and me, a young painter of Danish origin who shared his passion for football. Of course, his writing wasn't only for his lovers. In 1951, The Rebel came out.
It was a long essay exploring the tension between revolt and revolution. A rebel opposes or stands up to injustice. A revolutionary must fight to the end, no matter the means. I believe the end can never justify the means if the means are inhumane. Not everyone loved this argument, though. Jean-Paul Sartre, least of all.
My old friend Camus, you are simply a moralist, a beautiful soul who prefers to remain pure, uncontaminated by contact with reality.
My dear Jean-Paul, my experience is my reality. And in that experience, I've seen that for every rebel, there comes a time when justice demands the suspension of freedom.
No, that is where you are wrong. Justice and freedom are completely compatible. In poverty, workers cannot be free. They must work or die. This is why under communism...
Oh, of course, you go back to communism. But we must admit, absolute freedom is the right of the strongest to dominate, while absolute justice is achieved by the suppression of all contradictions. Therefore, it destroys freedom. We must simply live and let live in order to create what we are.
Their friendship was over. The split between these two intellectuals created a media sensation that would rival the coverage of a Hollywood divorce today. Nonetheless, Camus stood by his work. But his worldview was soon put to the test, back in his homeland of Algeria. The independence movement gained momentum after French promises of greater self-rule in Algeria went unfulfilled after the Second World War. By 1954, demonstrations evolved into a revolution. The National Liberation Front led an armed uprising in many regions across Algeria. The French forces' tactics were brutal, alienating support for their colonial rule at home and abroad.
I was 42 when I returned to Algiers in 1956. My goal was simple: to try and broker a ceasefire between French forces and the FLN, the Algerian National Liberation Front.
Camus maintained a stance of neutrality. That put him at odds with others on the French left.
War is always a horror, and this one was no exception. French ultra-nationalists and the army were attacking Algerian civilians, and the FLN was equally disgusting, planting bombs on buses or in cafes. A quote widely attributed to me at the time was, between justice and my mother, I choose my mother. What I actually said was, people are now planting bombs in the tramways of Algiers. My mother might be on one of those tramways. If that is justice, then I prefer my mother.
Camus didn't make any friends on either side of the conflict. The issue of Camus' view on Algerian independence is one many scholars have long debated. Some critics felt Camus' status as the child of settlers meant he was too personally invested in his privileged position in Algeria. Some, with a more sympathetic view, have argued he believed in the French ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. They say he imagined a future multicultural, multinational, Swiss-style confederation based on those principles.
Despite my best intentions, I failed. After much criticism and public exasperation over the issue of Algeria, I decided to practice a kind of public silence.
It later emerged that French settlers planned to assassinate Camus. Algerian revolutionaries also watched him, without him knowing. In 1956, Camus released The Fall.
The novel was about a Parisian lawyer who failed to come to the aid of a drowning woman. It was about Francine. I began to realize how much I'd hurt her. She once told me, "You're always pleading the causes of all sorts of people, but do you ever hear the screams of people who are trying to reach you?"
Camus' numerous affairs over the years had taken their toll. Francine was hospitalized for depression.
That distressed me. I never stopped loving Francine in my own bad way.
My dear Patricia, your youth and beauty invigorate me. I'm glad you've come to see me here in Paris.
One day, in 1957, I was at lunch with my dear Patricia Blake.
Excuse me, Monsieur Camus. We have a message for you.
Yes?
I am from the Gallimard office. We've just gotten spectacular news. You've won the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Oh.
At 44, he became the second youngest recipient of the Nobel Prize in Literature, after Rudyard Kipling. But the achievement just fed Camus' fear that his best work was behind him. After all, he thought, what could he do to top this?
It is to this generation that I should like to pass on the honor that you have just given me. While the Nobel Prize caused me emotional trouble, it gave me something I'd never had before: financial stability. And I was able to buy a house in Lourmarin for my family. In 1959, I spent the winter holidays with them, Francine and my 2 children.
During his time in Provence, he wrote many letters to his lovers in Paris, including Maria Caceres. His last letter to her was dated December 30, 1959, and it read,
I am so happy at the idea of seeing you again that I laugh just writing it. I kiss you and I hold you to me until Tuesday, when we will start again.
Days later, in January 1960, Camus reluctantly got into a car with his friend and publisher for the drive back to Paris. Camus had an intense phobia of riding in cars and avoided it as much as possible. When police found his body at the crash site, they found his unused train ticket in his coat pocket. Camus was 46 years old. His unfinished autobiographical novel, The First Man, was also found at the crash site. It was eventually published by Camus' daughter, Catherine. While Camus was buried in Lourmarin Cemetery, his friends and admirers erected a headstone for him in modern-day Tipaza, Algeria. His headstone has not been well maintained. His name has been defaced, and the French inscription is barely legible. But you can just about make out what it reads.
Here, I understand what they call glory. The right to love, without limits.
Hindsight is narrated by me, Charles Dance. This series was produced by Sout Podcasts. Their team is producer Rana Dawood, assistant producer Basant Samhoot, production assistants Heba Nabulsi and Kaula Alamori, sound design by Nuruddin Belhassen, assembly sound editing by Yazan Kawas. This episode is written by Justin Salhani, edited by Morgan Waters, research by Tarek Ayub. Additional research and fact-checking by Rama Sabanek. Special thanks to Professors David Sprinsen, Matthew Sharp, and Patrick Hayden for giving us interviews. Camus is played by Stefan Konica. Extra voices played by Anna Banderas, Emmanuel Hublon, and Bisha Najjar. Recording by TVC Soho Post-Production. Additional research and fact-checking by Al Jazeera and Vanessa Conneely. Joe DeFrias is the executive producer of Special Projects. Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. Hindsight is a historical drama podcast. All dramatized scenes and dialogue are inspired by historical events, old interviews, and in some cases, new conversations with people close to the subject.